Well, welcome to my garden. I'm Patricia, and it's nice to see such a good turnout. I was worried that nobody was going to come. This workshop is on no-dig gardening, which is something that I've been doing ever since I've been here. And I thought, first of all, maybe we should just clarify what we mean by no-dig gardening. Because obviously sometimes we do need to dig ponds, we need to dig to plant things, trees and things, and we need to dig out perennial weeds like couch grass and ground algae and things like that. What we actually mean by no-dig gardening is, I suppose, minimum soil disturbance, not turning over the soil every year, not double digging, not rotovating. And I started no-dig gardening because I didn't like digging. And yeah, it hurt my back, and I couldn't really see the point of it. You know, why do we dig?
Is it just tradition?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's habit.
Yeah. Or maybe farming as well, you know, ploughing.
Yeah,
so maybe
the copy of the farm. Yeah, yeah.
I think with a shortage of mulch material, you have to dig.
Do you?
Yeah, I think if you don't have a situation where you've got a lot of on-site mulch,
right,
you need to dig. You know, so on allotments, for example, where it's difficult to collect mulch, you've got to carry it.
Right.
I think people dig because that's how you make a tilth and that's how you put the seed in.
But what are you putting into the soil to replace the mulch?
I don't think people do. I'm not saying it's the right way, but you said why do people dig?
No,
and
that's
because to break
interesting.
the soil down,
Yeah.
you have to do something, and when you use a mulch, that does it for you.
Yes. All right, well that's good. Let me tell you why I think we shouldn't dig. This diagram shows the number of organisms that live in 1 square metre of soil. And you can see you've got your one bird and your slugs and snails and your worms and all the things that we can see in the soil. So when we come right down to the bottom layers, bacteria, we've got, is that 10 trillion?
Yeah.
It's a very large number with a very large number of noughts. And if we look at the protozoa, we've got, I think that's probably 10 billion. Now this is just in 1 square metre of soil, and nematoids and so on. And all these are microscopic. I mean, we can't even see them. We don't even know that they're in the soil. They are so tiny. You can only see them with a very powerful microscope. So our soil, healthy soil this is absolutely teeming with microbes that live in the soil. Right? And they are nature's gardeners, and they do a very good job of looking after the soil and maintaining healthy plant life. If we look at just one of these, the common, the one that we're most familiar with, the earthworm. In 1 acre of good soil, healthy soil, there's as many as 2 to 3 million earthworms, which are capable of moving 18 tons of soil in 1 year. I mean, those are incredible figures. So, earthworms are nature's diggers. They do the digging for us. We don't need to dig, we can sit back and, let them get on with it. And in the process of their digging, they shred organic matter that's lying on the surface of the soil, and they take it down into the soil, so they're enriching the soil with organic matter. As they burrow through the soil, they increase the porosity of the soil, which improves the drainage, the water capacity of the soil, and creates channels for the plant roots to grow. And they break up hard soils with their very powerful muscles and digestive action, and they bind together fine soils, so they're great soil improvers. Yeah? And they cycle nutrients and microbes as they move through the soil. So, as I said, they're great diggers. They do all the things that, digging does. And similar stories can be told of all the organisms that live in the soil. They're all searching for food, eating or being eaten, and in the process of doing that they're improving, maintaining soil health and maintaining plant health. They are nature's gardeners. And the amazing thing in this process, to me, is that this whole system appears to be driven by the plants themselves. How come? Well, we know about photosynthesis, how plants extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and take the carbon and release oxygen, which is what we breathe. What isn't so well known is what happens at the other end of the plant, in the root zone. And it appears that plants kind of sweat out or exude certain chemicals, including or mainly carbohydrates and proteins. And the carbohydrates are especially sugary substances which attract beneficial bacteria to eat those exudates in the root zone of the plant. Now, bacteria are quite amazing things, creatures, organisms. They are the best decomposers in the soil, and as they eat their way through organic matter, decomposing it, they retain in their cells the nutrients that they take in. They kind of immobilise them, they lock them up inside their own cells so they don't get leached out into the soil like artificial fertilisers do. If you put artificial fertiliser on the soil, 98% of it goes into the drainage system. But bacteria immobilise the nutrients, especially nitrogen, in their cells, and that is only released when the bacteria are eaten or decayed themselves. So these bacteria feeding on these sugary exudates from the plants then attract in their turn protozoa, next up the food chain, who in eating the bacteria release the nutrients, especially the nitrogen, which is then released for the plant to be able to take in and benefit from. And it's right in the root zone of the plant, where the plant needs, like home delivery system, if you like. And it's reckoned that protozoa and bacteria provide 80% of the nitrogen that plants need. So, in our soil, we have a natural, complex, self-supporting system that works just fine without interference from man or woman. And when we dig, particularly when we turn the soil over, we literally turn their world upside down. And by continually doing this, we upset, we damage, and at worst destroy the very structure and organisms that live in the soil, that maintain the plant health. Why would anyone want to do that? Let's look at weeds first. Things like chickweed, for instance, a single chickweed plant can produce 40,000 seeds. Now, they don't all grow, because if they did, it would be overrun by chickweed. Most of the seeds from common weeds lie dormant in the soil for maybe tens of years, maybe hundreds of years. Nobody really knows. and they tend to only get panicked into growing when the soil is disturbed. So when we dig the soil, we're actually bringing weed seeds to the surface where they've got light and air and conditions for growing. But they also panic to quick, we better grow and produce more seed because something's happening here. You know, our world is being catastrophically damaged. So that's one point about weeds. And I've noticed particularly in my garden, I've had to remake some of the raised beds in recent years, and inevitably had to disturb some of the soil in the process. And the beds, where I've disturbed the soil, I've had far more weeds than on the beds that have been left untouched, undisturbed. And I see it in the fields around about the farmer's plough. You know, they spray the field to get rid of all the weeds, then they plough it and harrow it and do all the things they do to it. And then the field is full of weeds again. So then they have to spray with herbicides to get rid of the weeds again. I mean, it's mad, and it's not a sustainable system. Leave the weed seeds in the soil where they're not going to grow, they're not going to do any damage. Also, a lot of weeds aren't going to do any harm anyway. Leave them as a mulch. You know, they'll give you good ground cover and keep the soil moist, and you know, if they're not doing any harm, then just let them be. Some perennial weeds that have long roots, like dock, dandelion, and even mare's tail, bring up very useful minerals from deep down in the earth, which we actually need in our food, in our soil. So rather than dig those up by the roots, it's more useful to actually cut them off and compost, or use the leaves as mulch, so that you're using them as a source of supplying the minerals that we need, but you're not letting them get out of hand by allowing them to seed. Yeah? Yeah. And you see the dandelion leaves you can eat in salads and things, they're really nice. And they're bringing up, you know, minerals which we desperately need in our food. The amount of minerals in our food has really decreased over the years, so we really need those minerals. So deep-rooted weeds have a very valuable place in our gardens.
But my compost comes from my weeding. A lot of it is generated by the weeds.
Yes.
Where would I make my compost from if I didn't have weeds?
Oh right, I see. Yeah, so you've got to let them grow. You want to let them grow so you can compost them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that what you do?
Yeah, that's what I do.
And then just pull them up when they're...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, they absolutely make the compost. Or mulch, or, you know, they have a value, is what I'm saying. It's everything that grows in the soil is organic matter and can be recycled back into the soil. Whether you do that by making compost and putting the compost on the soil, or mulching, or digging it in, or whatever your preference is. The final part of this, which is, you know, how we look after the soil. Obviously, in nature, in the natural world, you've got the cycle looks after itself. The leaves fall off the trees, plants die and decompose on the surface, and worms and other bacteria take them down into the soil, and they form their own mulch, and so the system is continually replenished and regenerated. But when we're growing vegetables, we're actually removing some of that organic matter from the system. So we need to give something back. You know, we can't just take and not give something back. So what we need to do is mulch like mad. We're not digging the soil, but we need to mulch it with organic matter, so that the worms have got, and bacteria and all the other creatures that live in the soil have got food to keep eating and replenishing the system. It's like you've got to get a balance to the whole system. I mean, this year has been particularly bad for slugs and snails, and I've just spent the morning picking them out of my vegetable garden, great big ones. And they are, doing quite a lot of damage in the garden. But in a normal year, the birds take their fill, the frogs take their fill. If you've got hedgehogs, great. Everything is food for something else, and if you've got a well-balanced, healthy garden, really no one thing should get out of hand. It's a bit like in the soil. You've got like good bacteria and bad bacteria. You've got good nematodes and bad nematodes. You've got pests and you've got the beneficial bugs. And the beneficial bugs, on the whole, keep the pests at bound. And it's the same in the garden, really. You've got a healthy balance in your garden. There shouldn't be any one thing